Hello, Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity, and today we're going to talk about marijuana use in teens and young adults and this idea that it's perfectly safe, and we're going to see that it really isn't, and it definitely plays a role in, we're not going to even talk about the potential psychotic episodes and anxiety and everything that it's supposed to help, but it might not. But before we go on, make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel. So this was a huge meta-analysis looking at over 63 studies, 438,000 young adults and teens on their marijuana use. And ultimately what they found is about 22% of the kids had used in the past month, and 37% had used it at any point. So it's not the same as it was when I was a teenager in high school 35 plus years ago, where you had a pretty small select group of people that used marijuana on a regular basis, and maybe some of the people at parties or whatever that might participate in it more frequent or less frequently. But there has definitely been an increased perception that marijuana is safe because it's been legalized in many states across the country, medical marijuana, and this is not discussing its role in anxiety or seizures or anything that might calm the brain, because I've certainly talked about that before, and I think that there's a role. But for regular recreational use, it clearly has its effect, especially on a young developing mind. The other thing to consider is that the THC content of today's marijuana is far in excess of what it was back in even as early as the 90s. Back then it was around 4%, now it's 14%, so it's way more psychoactive than it ever was. But this study looked at academic performance across a very large group of teens and young adults, and they found that the regular use, and the data was generally worse in regular users, so at least weekly, and in those who started before age 16. So obviously the later we can start, the better off things are. The younger, the more potential it's going to have an effect on the brain and motivation. And there's a lot of reasons why this might be the answer. It might even not be a direct brain effect, and the studies didn't really look into how we take them in, whether it's in inhalation or gummy or vape. There's lung aspects to that to be considered. But the regular users were 39% more likely to have lower grades. They were half as likely to graduate from high school. They 28% lower rates of college enrollment, and 219% higher risk of being a high school dropout. Those are all pretty significant numbers for something that teens today, especially teens, consider this as there's no harm in it, right? Some people, until they're educated, even think that it might be okay to drive, and clearly it's not. It's driving under the influence, regardless of whether that's marijuana or alcohol. But we've become so permissive in society that we've gone far too much in the other direction, where the pendulum is now saying it's okay, but there are clearly ramifications. This is a big study. So if you have children, maybe it's time to have some conversations with them about marijuana use and possibly delaying it as late as possible and more infrequent use if possible. As always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the description. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs information, and subscribe to the channel.